Hey, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Just before we start, sound check. My sound coming in clear? Great. Wonderful. Secondly, I think a mazel tov is owed to Andy, I believe, on a bar mitzvah for a child. Mazel tov.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
It's quite the time to celebrate anything, so we send our mazel tov in a more muted way than we might otherwise.
Yes, mazel tov. Yes, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will continue with our discussion of Benayahu, Ben Yehoyada, great significance. I just wanted to start maybe with a little background. So we're on the whiteboard now. Call this the value added section of today's class. I don't know if I can say anything is value added, but there are times where I can at least share some basic knowledge which folks may or may not have access to otherwise. Rounding, look for a pen actually. Where is my special computer pen? Here it is. Okay. So there are traditionally four expansions of the name of God that are associated with different sphirot. You'll see what I mean when I draw the expansions out in a moment. And those take on some significance by allusion in the story. Many of the Lurianic classic commentaries on the Zohar suggest that the passages we're doing are working with some of these names. But I just wanted to throw them out there. They're often referred to by the gematria of their letters. So see, I think I don't want to write the divine names. So I'll just write Hey as a kuf here up top. So really kuf equals Hey. So that would be God's four-letter name. And so the first name, the name of 72, or so it has there, would go something like this. You write out each letter. So here we have Yud. I got this right. Hey. Vav. Trying to do some quick math on my pad here. So if you add up, so you see I've spelled out the letters Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. I've spelled them out. So like I've spelled out the letters phonetically. So in this version of the spelling, Yud is 10, and Vav is 6, and Dalet is 4, 10, 6, 4, 20. Hey, and Yud 5 and 10, 15, 35. Vav, so we're 35 now. 6, 6, 12, another 10 is 32, 32, 35. I don't know, simple math, anyone?
67.
67. Did I get this wrong? Maybe I'm not spelling correctly. Let me try this again. 10, 6, 4, 20. Hope it'll work. Hey, Yud, 10, 5. Got 35. This is where I got it wrong, I think. Vav, Yud, Vav. I made it 32. It should be 22. So that would, 12 plus 10 is 22. I didn't get enough sleep. So 35 and 22 is 57. Now we're on track. Hey, 5 and Yud, 10, 72. Behold, it adds up to 72. This is classically associated with chokhmah, with wisdom. Why? To ask, we could discuss that. Might have to do something with the use of Yud, which often is associated with chokhmah as one of the first letters of the divine name as part of the expansion. Hey, Vav, Hey, you see the Yud is throughout. Could be why it's associated with chokhmah, but more about that after if you're curious. Okay, so the second is, this is associated with Binah, the second version of it. So I'll do it this way. I have Yud, Hey, Vav, So the difference here, you'll notice, is that for Vav, instead of Vav Yud Vav, it's spelled Vav Aleph Vav, an alternative spelling. So if you just do the math, 10 minus what, you'll see it's 9 less. So that would equal 60. We got a 63 name here. This would be Bina. This is associated with Bina. Okay, we've got our third name, the name of Ma, 45, and Yud. Hey, now that Aleph is intruding in some more places here. Vav. Hey, I kind of feel like that guy with big hair I used to watch doing art growing up. Okay, so Yud Hey Vav Hey. So if you add this up, you'll see we've lessened by 9, 9, and 9 from the original. So that's 27 less, so 72 minus 27, you get to 45. Or you could just add it instead of subtracting. But see, this is associated with Tiferet, but with Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, with the whole 6, the 6 unit that is frequently a unit, sometimes called Kudsha Brichu, Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed Holy One in the Zohar, and sometimes called Zeir Anpin in the Ari. Okay, but this is Tiferet, this third, but all of it. You know, and then the final is Malchut. We got Ban. Okay, so good. Hey. Vav. Hey. And when you add that up, maybe I'll just take my word for it to get to 50, 52. So, why, pray tell, have I? So these are the classic 4 expansions of the 4-letter tetragrammaton. And by the way, in the Kabbalah, there are expansions of other names of God too, particularly Ahiyah and others. But so this is a way of things working with. The reason I wanted to share this is that Benayahu, or does everyone have this who wants it? I don't know if you want me to like save it and send it to you just in case. I'm gonna save it just so we have it before I erase it. Any questions about this before I kind of go on? Okay, I know we're in suspended disbelief here. Like, why are we doing all this? I know. Okay, so that's, and this is all in relation to Baladan, the demon who's going to feature today. You have to know some of this to really get the demon. And I know you all want to know the demon. 2021 after all. Feeling a lot like 2020. Okay, so all right. So Benayahu. Oh, we can do a funny thing here. Benayahu. Well, we could do this, which is we could separate the name. Yud, Hey, and Vav could represent Chochmah, Bina, and Tiferet, as they do. And then Benayahu here would not just be the son of Yud Hey Vav, as we elaborated earlier, right? This idea that is the full realization or the embodiment of God's full flow or river, as the metaphor was here, or the temple, whatever it was, as Shekhinah, but rather the name of 52 after Yud Hey Vav, and the name of 52, you know, we said was Yud Hey Vav Hey equals them. So what could be going on here, what may be going on, is the Zohar playing with, what is going on, I'll say even, is probably the Zohar is playing with this mystical name it's inherited as a tradition. And so Benayahu, as the sort of related to Yesod, coming in and bringing all righteousness into the world, is also about the name and seeing Benayahu and seeing this kind of 52. Okay, That's Benayahu. Now, we said at the end of last time, and we'll get to it, I think we named the demon at the very end of last time, that there's like a lion that comes and eats the sacrifices. But when Benayahu came and destroyed the temple himself, as it were, when God committed an act of, so to speak, divine suicide and, so to speak, killed the lion, definitely struck the lion. We got stuck on this, wait, so to speak, Kiviyachol or Vadai, really? So I consulted some commentaries with him on that question, and everyone says, Kiviyachol katil Vadai hika. So to speak, killed, definitely struck. In other words, God definitely struck out at God's own flow, and so to speak, killed for the moment, not a permanent death, but an apparent death, like Elvis. So you get the idea. So, okay, just trying to keep it real. So if we go for a moment to our demon, Bil Adan, so the Zohar is going to interpret this Bil Adan demon as not human. It's not human. As Ba. Interpreted as, even though this seems to be actually named for like real king who is our enemy, but the demonic version of it is Bal Adam, not human. And Adam in Gematria, if you do 1, Aleph is 1, Dalet is 4, 1 and 4 is 5, and 40 is 45, 45, Ma. You may remember Ma was the name for Tiferet. Ma was the name of Yod He Vav He. It involved Tiferet. Maybe I'll spell that out there. That's the 45 name. So what you get here is, even in the names of Benayahu and Biladan, this demon, or Baladan, you get a severing of the relationship between Tiferet and Malchut vis-a-vis Yesod. If we go to the Sphirot chart for the moment, new share. Do you see the Sphirot now? Yeah, so what you get is, Benayahu, Malchut, the coming after all of this, the full flow, Yud, He, Vav, Benayahu, Ban, the name of Shekhinah, the name of Malchut, the name spelled that way. And you get Baladam. When Benayahu kills the flow from above, what you get instead represented below, eating the sacrifices, when you don't have the flow from above, is not Adam, not the name of 45, which represents Tiferet, which represents God is active in the world. You get the opposite of that, the anti-God, the demon. Okay, all that just sort of like, sometimes the Zohar is cryptic code for other mystical concepts. I mean, it's already cryptic and we're already decoding it, but just to go to like the beyond, I feel like we're often in the basic level of Zohar, just what's the narrative and how could we interpret it, with allusion to the Sphira, so maybe like basic +1. So I wanted to move us from like honor Zohar into like Zohar 2 for a moment. How sometimes it works, just as an example, because this is a pretty clear-cut and somewhat concise thing that's going on. So take it, leave it, but many of the classic longer commentaries have this at play. Okay, so keep that in mind, if you want, as we go back to our text. But anytime now, if you're reading your own mystical literature and you see allusion to these 4 names, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ban, you'll know what they're talking about. Or when you hear vague allusions to the name of 72, the name of 63, the name of 45, and people say, yeah, it's some mystical idea. It's actually not that hard. It's just spelling. It's just spelling. Okay. Final thing I'll say is that Yichud Ma'uban, The union between ma'uban is often described as the classic spiritual practice of the Zohar. So now you know what yichud ma'uban means. You know, I don't know. I've never looked at the Wikipedia entry if there is one on that. But like, now you know. It's the union between Tiferet and Shekhinah, or in layman's terms, it's the making real of the divine personality or kingdom in our world. It's Kabbalato Malchut Shamayim in classic rabbinic terminology. The two who yaradi katari. So further, he went down and slew the lion. I think this, we might have read this last time, but I'll just read through it again. Bizimnin kadma'in kadhay nahar hava mashiach memoy letata havu kayamin Yisrael b'shlimu. Dizabchin divchin v'korbanon lechapar al nafshayu chedein hava nachit mila'ela diyukne decharaye v'havu chaman le'al gabe madbecha raditz al tarfei achil korbanin kegvar takif v'chol kabin havu mitatamrin mekamevelo nafke levar. It's he went down and slew the lion in the verse. So in the verse, Benayahu goes into some pit, snowy day, kills a lion. In former times, when this river gushed its waters below, the people of Israel were fulfilled, offering offerings and sacrifices to atone for their souls. Then from above would descend the image of a lion, whom they could see on the altar, crouching over its prey, consuming sacrifices like a fierce warrior, while all dogs hid themselves away, not venturing out. By the by, in Ezekiel, there are 4 animals classically they're mentioned as being, like the faces of the chariot in Ezekiel 1 there, and one of them is a lion. And the lion is classically understood, so it doesn't take at this point, it won't take a rocket scientist to know that the 4 animals are going to correspond to the 4 letters of the divine name and are going to correspond to the emergence of the Sfirot. And so the lion will represent Chesed, will represent Judah, the kingdom, but will also represent Chesed. Just so you know. Okay, so that's what it is. And so sacrifices are seen here in this version of it with the lion as empowering Chesed, as causing God's mercy to extend upon us in forgiveness, right? Because it's, even though repentance is located in Binah, it's kind of a place where everything returns to, but the idea that God forgives us is rooted in God's loving kindness and Chesed. And so the sacrifices, which we mentioned here, that God would forgive us when we offer sacrifices, they're eaten by a lion. They serve as fuel for God's loving kindness in this metaphor. That's why the lion. Note also, chesed here is strong. A lion is not a weak kind of loving kindness. It's not like a flower petal. Not that there's anything wrong with flower petals. The Zohar, in fact, opens with flower petals. But the lion it's a stronger kind of loving kindness, represented by the right side. It's fierce loving kindness. Okay. Hevan de garmu chovin, you nachit lego dardin de latate, vekatil behu aryai, de lo bai lamehav le tarfe kedivikadmita, kiviachol katilei huikatari vadai. This is where we kind of ended last time. The tocha bor leinai de sitra achra bisha, kevan de chamat hachi hausitra achra it takfat, vishadrat lahat kalba lamechol korbanin, umashme dehu aryai, Uriel, Ampe Arye, Umash Medahu Kalba, the Ladan Shme de Laviu Bechlal Adam El Kalba, the Ampe Kalba. Kind of glossing over our whole discussion last time, when sins prevailed, he descended to the rungs below and he killed that lion. So there's a sense, by the way, that it's interesting. The lion is the one that absolves the sins in a sense, but at a certain point, the sins are too much for the lion, Like, in other words, when sins prevailed, wait a second, isn't it the lion, God's loving kindness, which causes forgiveness for sins? So why should sins ever prevail? When sins prevail, it presumes that sins can prevail. The answer is no. At a certain point, our behavior overtakes even God's loving kindness and causes a different response. Note also the importance of the impulse from below in our behavior generating God's response in this manifestation. When sins prevailed, he descended to the rungs below and he killed that lion, no longer willing to provide its prey. He, as it were, Kivyachol, killed it. He slew the lion, really, within the pit, in plain sight of the evil other side. Sitra Achra Bisha. Seeing the Sitra Achra, by the way, is the demonic and always represents everything has a demonic side, every good thing. Because balance, Tiferet, the Sphirot are always coming to a center point. But if they veer too far from the center, that's where the issue comes into play. And so the Zohar's idea of sin is kind of a lack of balance, right? And so too much kindness becomes demonic in the Zohar. Too much strength becomes demonic in the Zohar. They need to be integrated fully. All of the things need to be integrated and balanced. That's the idea. So sin comes fundamentally from a lack of balance. But when the things become unmoored, they can become almost permanently separated, so to speak, and really emerge into their own entity, totally disconnected from the whole. And so you get, powerful godlike demonic forces that take on their own identity. And because they become so, they're not just like negative forces, they get names, just like God gets names, right? They take on real personality. Seeing this, that other side was emboldened to send a dog to eat the offerings, right? Because now there's no lion, so the offerings are there. And who eats food that's left over? I mean, some of it's just plain, like who eats the food when there's no one to eat the food? The dog. So what is the name of the lion? Uriel. For his face is the face of Aryeh, of a lion. What is the name of the dog? Baladam is its name, for it is excluded from the category of Adam. Baladam, that's the drasha of the Zohar. Human, but is rather a dog. Its face, a dog. Okay. Just the note 279 here is a helpful note. The name derives from Merodach Baladan, king of Babylon, 722 to 710, with whom King Chizkiyahu of Judea had contact. See 2 Kings, where he is named Merodach Baladan, son of Baladan. On this, the Talmud comments, why was he called Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan? It has been told Baladan was a king whose face turned into that of a dog. So his son sat upon his throne instead. In his documents, he wrote his name and the name of his father, King Baladan. Baladan's dog face is probably a rabbinic explanation of the dog seen on Assyrian Babylonian monuments, he says. Okay, so that's all interesting. So we get the sort of etiology of this figure, but then takes on its own mythical personality. Biyom Hasheleg. Biyoma de Garmu Chovin Vidina Itzdan Le'ela Me'im Beidina Ilah Yadaktiv Lo Tira Leveta Misheleg Ki Choveta Lavushanim. We'll get there. Ktiv Lo Tira Leveta Misheleg Da Dina Ilah Amai begin dechol beita lavush shanim v'yachil lemisbal esha tekifa ad kan raza tikra. On a snowy day, hence the episode for today's Zohar, the snowy day, also the name of a great child's book. Okay, on a snowy day, a day when sins prevailed and judgment was decreed above by the Beit Dina Ilah, the heavenly Beit Din, the heavenly court, celestial court. This it is written, she is not afraid of snow for her household, known because it's in the Eshet Chayil chapter of Proverbs, I think. She is not afraid of snow for her household, judgment on high. Why? So snow here represents din, represents gevura, represents judgment. Why? Because her whole household is clothed in crimson and can endure the fierce fire. Okay, so this is a really interesting point. First of all, why is snow in the verse called judgment? What about snow is judgment? After all, snow is white. Feels pure. I might have thought, just to deepen the question, snow. I'll even make it deeper. The gematria of snow is sheleg, which is 30, 303. I'm making this up. This is fake. 3,203. That's all threes. It's multiples of 3. If bracha is 2, 3 is even better. Snow is just wonderful. I could have said that and you would have nodded and said, oh. So when you get into Kabbalistic, you're always working with the letters. So therefore, I'm not going to now expand shin, yud, nun, and make it mean something. No. So sheleg. But why is sheleg judgment? Anyone?
I would have thought the opposite because of the famous Isaiah, Keshelag Yalbinu.
Right?
Yeah, Chatatechem Keshani, Keshelag Yalbinu.
And there are, in fact, places, I'll say even, where sheleg is associated with purity in the mystical literature. So why here is sheleg negative? What about snow? Ignoring the color for the moment.
Gematria isn't 333 doubled as 666. Is that the devil? They have that gematria as well.
Interesting. I think it has to do with the frozen quality of the snow, right? Which is that if we're going for a river as something that flows, right? And we had worked with the idea of the river of divine energy above. Well, snow freezes the river. You know, it freezes it. So I think it's the frozen aspect of it. Lifnei karato mia amod, it says in Tehillim also, before it's cold, who can stand, who can survive. So I think it's just the non-moving motion of the divine flow, freezing it, representing the judgment. That's the best I've got. The footnote may say something like that. I don't remember. Yeah, the congealing and hardening of water. This is the same kind of idea, said in better words. Now, why is it that she, who is she? Who is always she? She can only be two things in this. So, you know, back to Angie's classic question, aren't all this, it's all blurs together. So she is usually always going to be Bina, except for the one time when Bina was a king in one of our passages, but Bina can be she. And Malchut, Shechina, can be she. So these are the two she's that ever exist in the Zohar. So why is she not afraid of judgment? Why is Shekhinah, the divine presence, not afraid of this demonic, you know, there's some, like God doesn't fear God's cut off of God's flow to God's own earthly presence. Why not? So our whole house is red with crimson. Red with crimson. Wait a second. So the idea here is that Shekhinah can deal with Gvura because Shekhinah, even when it's cut off, you know, it's an interesting thing happens here. Gvura cuts off. Okay, pay attention. This is the Zohar making a drasha it hasn't made to us yet. So this is new. Like we heard a lot of metaphors for the same thing over and over again. Now we're getting a new idea. Even when Gvura comes and cuts off the flow vis-a-vis all of this, Benayahu, you know, comes and kills the lion, cuts off the chesed by using Gvura, the snowy day, right? So the energy from Gvura animates to cause a sort of self-sadomasochism, and Malchut becomes cut off. The line from Yesod comes. So nonetheless, Malchut Shekhinah doesn't fear this because Malchut is crimson red. Malchut is comparable to Gvura. She knows violence. God in this world is okay with a little violence, right? So let's just flesh that out a little bit. Shekhinah, like the Matt kind of glosses over it, but I think it's a pretty dramatic point actually in the text. How does Shekhinah, what does it mean, Chaveta lavush shanim? Like she knows crimson red, she knows judgment. She has an internal familiarity or affinity to strong judgment.
Can I ask a different question first?
Always
there,
change the question, change the premise, please. Yes.
Some, all these metaphors floating around. So like the one metaphor is that some flow from above is being cut off with these demons or with this judgment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we're being told that Shekhinah down there with Malchut is not afraid or intimidated. I'm adding the word intimidated, but not, no problem for Shekhinah, but because it's got some other quality we're calling crimson right now. But if the flow isn't the flow what animates Malchut and Shekhinah? So with the metaphor that some sort of flow, the divine energy is cut off, wouldn't that, whatever Shekhinah's intrinsic properties might be, take out the vital juices of Shekhinah and Malchut because they're cut off from the flow?
Right, good.
These are just the two metaphors, like, mixing together, which maybe doesn't always work, but something confuses me there. We're being told that Shekhinah kind of has no problem with what's happening here. But if what's happening here is a cutoff of divine flow, then the metaphysics seems to entail that Shekhinah should have a problem.
Good. So I'll read here an interesting passage from the Sulam, one of the classic commentaries about this. He asked this question. Yeah, he actually asked specifically this question. He says the following. Keneged hadinim halalu amra nukba, in correspondence to these harsh judgments from above, the nukba, the feminine, the female says, that's Shekhinah, samchuni ba'ashishut, quoting Shir Hashirim, I will support myself with ashishut. So he understands this not as, but as two fires. Harom is the beis ishiot. Isha ma'ala shehi bina ve'isha la'atzma. So Malchut has, two essences. One is the essence from above that it receives from Binah, but the other fire of Shekhinah is its own. It is still its own entity. Now, this is where it gets a little tough because Shekhinah only receives, right? And so we might get into this. Well, wait, if Shekhinah doesn't receive anything, what is Shekhinah? What can Shekhinah be if there is nothing to receive from above? So I think this is where the kiviyachol, so to speak, comes into play. Shekhinah still has her own identity because we still exist, right? So even when the flow is as cut off as the flow gets, whether that's entire or not, it's hard to say, but there's still something here. It's demonic, but it's here when the flow is cut off. And so what is that? It's Eish Shala Atzma, her very own fire, in the words of the Sulam. So this is how he answers the question. She has her very own fire, and her very own fire, when it's cut off from all these other things, is Gevura. Well, why is it Gevu? So I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at that. I'm not sure I understand that fully. So
I don't have a stab at why it's specifically Gevura, but there is also the other idea that although we distinguish the 10 sefirot, each one, contains all the others, right? Like they're not really distinct entities from each other. And so that would make it possible to sort of simultaneously hold on to the idea that the flow is being cut off and yet Shekhinah still got Gevura, still got it there because all of them are present to all of them at the same time, even as these emphases shift. So I do appreciate that my question is kind of answered, right? Like with this move here.
In a different way, Rav Kook was known to say in very, we're dealing in non-history time, but Rav Kook said very much that the reason for things happening around World War II is that when times of judgment and violence and whatever are occurring on the planet, There's something about that, that means it's totally cut off from above. It's hester panim entirely. It's total hiddenness of God's flow. That's the animating force in history at that point, and it becomes a mode. So, he said, he wrote some of this in his diaries, and then some of the entries make their way in surface version into Orot a little bit. Where he says Baal Milchamot, his entry there is on God, master of war, and so it's that idea, I think, actually, right? It's good. So all of the Sfirot are always, because it's the 1 and the 10, but we never want to say that God has 10 parts. We can't do that and be monotheists. So all of these are just costumes, as it were, or roles that God takes on. But really, any of them, or as Rav Moshe Cordovero said, none of the Sfirot are separate from each other. They're a unity. We're just talking like this. So therefore, now we're talking a lot like this and very specifically like this. You could claim that claim is a little bit of a farce, but as critics did. But so right. So Malchut, and particularly Malchut, when it's totally cut off from divine, ultimately kindness and wisdom from above, is gonna have affinity to Gevurah. And actually, and ironically, paradoxically, in its state of cut offness, its relationship to the Godhead above, or deeper within, if you prefer that metaphor, is the Gevurah itself. And so that's the thread that doesn't allow it to be cut off. There's something about being cut off, which is like, fine, cut me off. I'll relate to you in cut off mode. There's like, Shekhinah can't get rid of God above because it's all coming from above. Does that make sense? Kind of. That's what I want to.
I sort of follow that. I do.
Is that where you're kind of working with that, right? Like, you can't cut off. You can't cut off. So this Zohar, this is the Kivyachol Vadai, I think, actually. I think it's the Zohar is, I think that's actually what's going on is the Zohar is like, well, you cut it off, but you can't. Kivyachol Vadai. No, you did. Yes, you did, but you can't. In fact, cutting it off created another avenue of relationship, the relationship of harshness. Because things relate in their resemblance. That, if you had to take away like a tagline to help you understand this, the way things relate to each other, and this is something that Ari made very clear, is in the resemblance to each other. Okay. If not in quantity, because these qualities are seen as being infinite, then in quality. In quality. Okay. Oh. Sorry. So the Mac kind of okay. And Ad Kan Raza Dekra. Up to this point, this Ad Kan Raza Dekra. Okay, we'll deal with this. So hold on. Let's not gloss over it. Oh, whoa. What have I done? I don't know what you see. So the Mat kind of includes it in the next paragraph. Until here, mystery of the verse, what is written next? He slew an Egyptian. So we'll see how we're dealing with this Ad Kan Raza Dekra. It's a little ambiguous. Okay. Others included kind of as the conclusion to the prior paragraph. Maktiv Batre, Vahui Kait Ish Mitzri Ish Mare, Hacha Raza Dekra Taleoda. Yibachos Israel Chavu Iu Istale Kumina Minayu Kol Tavin Vachol Norin Dahavuni Hiramon. Hui Kat Ish Mitzri Da Nahora Dahu Nahora Dahava Nahir Lon Israel Man Ihu Moshe Dechti Vatomar Naish Mitzri Tilani Itilanu Vitamani Tilid Vitamanit Itarbe Vitaman Istalik Nahora Ila. This is very interesting. Till here, mystery of the verse. What is written next? He slew an Egyptian, a man of good appearance. Is the next part of the verse. Hui Kat Ish Mitzri Tov Mareh. So who is this Egyptian that Benayahu killed? Well, the plain meaning is he killed an Egyptian enemy of the Israelites, but they reinterpret it here. The mystery of the verse discloses that whenever Israel sinned, he can be Tiferet or Yesod. Yesod and Tiferet are kind of like the same. Yesod is just an extension or an appendage or the phallus of Tiferet. Or he can be Chochmah, Av. Those are the two he's. She's Binar Malchut. He is kind of Yesod or Chochmah. Just to help out that a little bit. He departed, withholding from them all the goodness, all the light, illumining them. Tiferet departed from below. Tiferet kind of leaves Shekhinah and ununifies. Ma and Ban separate in the names. He slew an Egyptian man. So who's the Egyptian man? The light of that light illumining Israel. Who is he? He slew the light that shined on Israel. And who is it? Moshe, Moses, as it is written. They said, an Egyptian man rescued us. Shockingly, right? You think an Egyptian's a foreigner, so the Zohar does, well, who's the classic Egyptian? Moshe. How do we know? Because Jethro's daughters call him an Egyptian when he comes and saves them at the well from attack. And so Moshe. Now Moshe is Emet. Moshe Emet v'Torato Emet. Moshe is truth and his Torah is truth. Moshe represents truth, and truth is Tiferet. Tiferet is balance, because truth includes all things in perfect harmony. Shalom, it's peaceful, it's Moshe. It's also Yaakov. It's both. So Yaakov is Tiferet, Moshe is Emet, but they overlap. This is written, an Egyptian man rescued us. There he was born, there he was raised, there he rose to the highest light. You know, he did everything in Egypt. In fact, he never went to Israel. You know, so they're defending. Moshe is an Egyptian. Moshe is not an Egyptian. Moshe. So the answer is, well, no. You know, playing up on the themes that both the Ten Commandments, the movie, and the Disney version, right? They both emphasize Moshe's growing up as an Egyptian in the palace in ways that the text doesn't. Much, Midrash a little, movies a lot, Hollywood likes the plot, the Zohar likes the plot. Anytime Hollywood likes the plot, you can guess the Zohar will like the plot too. So, or maybe they took it from there. No, everything happened in the Egyptian palace. That's where he grew up. That's where all the drama unfolded, in the eternal house he grew up in, even though there's not much written about it. There he was raised there, and that's where, by the way, God spoke to him. So in the Sfirot, you know, just to follow what's happening, Benayahu, kind of the flow brought from Binah, we said before, all the way down, full righteousness, Hamnuna Saba, the fish, right? Gathering everything, swimming and eating everything and bringing it into the world. So now Yesod came, kills the Ari, okay, right? So comes down, strikes out at God's presence in the world, severs the connection. And now we're continuing the war along the battlefront, if you're trying to follow. And now we strike out at Tiferet. Right, so we're fighting up and removing God's flow further at Moshe. And he kills Moshe. It's like a full battle. But David's generals are battling the fight to keep God out of the world. Ish mareh kama da'at amer, umareh v'lo bechidot. Ish kama da'at amer, ish Elohim kivyachol ba'ala dehu mareh kavod Hashem. Tizachalan hagadar gada bechol re'utei ba'ara ma'at dozache barnash achara. So a man of mareh, good appearance, as it says, mareh, right, in mareh v'lo bechidot, in Numbers, in Bamidbar, it says, Moshe, all the other prophets prophesied by seeing riddles, metaphors, they saw poetry, but Moshe saw God himself, as it were. And who is God? God's self, Tiferet, God's personalities, they are Anpin. You know, not Atika Kadisha, which no one could see, not Keter, but Tiferet. You know, God's kind of personality is represented by Tiferet, if you're getting this. And so Moshe is called appearance because he saw God's appearance. Right? Note the play. It's not really about his appearance. It's about God's appearance. Of course, his appearance also is affected because he shines light, right? So he becomes a certain appearance because he sees God's appearance. So it's getting into appearance. And by the way, not just for Moshe, for all of us, to the extent that we appear and shine light, is because of what we see or perceive. Back to the origin of the Zohar and Petach Einayim and the whole mystical pursuit. Right? The more we're able to perceive, the more we're able to shine. And so Moshe is of good appearance specifically because of what he can see. So that's interesting also. In appearance, not in riddles, man, as it is said, right, Ishmareh, in the verse here in Shmuel. So it said Isha Elohim. At the very end of the Torah, Moshe is described as the man of God, Isha Elohim. So they translate it as the husband. What do you mean, Isha Elohim? The husband of God. Appearance of the presence of Yud Hey Vav Hey. For he was worthy of conducting this run on earth in any way he wished, something no human attains. This is a kind of shocking idea. I'll just read the note here. Shechina is the Mara, appearance of the presence of Yod Hey Vav Hey, the set of divine manifestation. She is also known as Elohim. Moses is on such. Why is Shechina known as Elohim in this way? Because it comes from the language of like Alima, forces of power. And so all the earthly powers that act, Elohim. So what we really get here, just to understand, if Moshe is the husband, listen to me, the husband of Shekhinah, Moshe, represented by Tiferet, where he's able to perceive God, is kind of up here, actually. Moshe is living up here, seeing God up here, but also reflecting what he sees up there. And so Moshe is associated with Tiferet, and he's the husband of Shekhinah. Tiferet and Shekhinah are related. So here, Moshe actually takes on a higher status than Shekhinah. Like in an interesting flip of the script, Moshe is the husband of Shekhinah. Moshe, the husband here, is seen as superior, at least giving to the Shekhinah what she has. And that's where the Zohar then elaborates further and says, for he was worthy of conducting this run on earth in any way he wished, something no other human attained. Moshe could manipulate the material world with its divine flow, because we're really not talking about Moshe anymore. We're talking about Tiferet. Tiferet can do what Tiferet wants with the world below. But Benayahu kills this. We're just describing what it is Benayahu killed, remember? So all this dies.
All right. So the reason we're talking about Moshe now is because the verse that was talking about going down and slaying the lion, 2 Samuel, continues with he slew an Egyptian. So that verse, was that verse in its literal meaning talking just about Moshe originally, and then we were
No, it wasn't talking about Moshe at all. It's talking about some Egyptian, opponent of the Israelites during the time of King David.
Oh, but so then when it goes to the line, he slew an Egyptian, that's just about this other opponent. It's not about Moses.
Right, but the Zohar reinterprets that as, no, it's Moshe. You see, it's an Egyptian. Really, Benayahu didn't kill an enemy. He killed God.
I see.
Moses.
Oh, it was Moses being slain in this, or
yes. He kills Moses.
Oh, I got it backwards. I thought Moses, since he slew an Egyptian, in that story, was the slayer, not the slain.
Yes, good. Okay, so the next thing on my notes is to note the dramatic irony. Moses, that kills an Egyptian in defense of the people, is killed by David's general in a war on God as an Egyptian. Moses, who kills an Egyptian to defend the Israelites, is killed as an Egyptian by an Israelite attacking God.
And at the same time, this is actually quite beautiful, hard to follow, but beautiful. But so at the same time, Moses is to be identified with this, Tiferet, you were saying, or with so he's the force in the upper realms at the same time as he's a human being. It says in the note too, that insofar as he's married to Shekhinah, he abstains from sexual relations with his earthly wife, right? Like, so So he's like simultaneously living in both realms, essentially. His spirit up there, I don't know, his body down here, or I don't know if that would work, but it's quite fascinating.
Right, because he doesn't eat for 40 days, and eat or sleep or drink. He's not human in these ways. Yeah. So here, Moses, the figure, in some distinction to the classic rabbinic tradition, which seeks to kind of humanize him, here there is a kind of aggrandizement of Moshe, the figure, who is killed.
Why that's good? Like why Benayahu is killing all this good stuff, right? It's
Because we're
killing.
sinning, right? Because when our sins prevail, right?
Yeah, so this is describing the internal process by which God gets fed up with us. Also, think of Moshe, who breaks the tablets, getting fed up with the people and breaking God's revelation, earthly revelation. And note the irony there too, something I wrote in my notes. I have notes here. And think of God breaking Moshe, Benayahu representing, in an effort to keep revelation from the people. So why? Because we've sinned, we've messed it up. And so this is both a reaction, but also the process by which God goes into exile, or causes us to go into exile, or causes exile as a metaphysical state to descend on the world. Now, exile is still connected because God knows harshness and harshness knows God. There's still that. Remember, Shekhinah still knows Gevura because she's shanim, dressed in crimson. But query, killing Moshe, I don't know, people, lots of commentators of Zohar, lots of people have written articles about Freud in his book Moses and Monotheism, where the people kill Moses in his book and make it all up because they feel guilty. I want to read Moses. It's been a long time since college. I read it in college. So see Freud's Moses and Monotheism. I believe he makes a reference in one of the notes there. But here the Zohar has this idea too of Moshe being killed similarly. Okay, and differently. I don't think there's actually that much in common, but people with degrees feel otherwise. Okay.
But it's not just Moshe being killed, it's we killing Moshe by our sins.
Yes, we kill Moshe.
We have to take responsibility for that.
That is the Freud idea. I don't know.
Actually, now that you mention it.
That's precisely what Freud says.
But this is also not a one-time historical event. Presumably, whenever sins prevail, we're doing it again, right? Like this goes on. Like Ralph Cook was saying, World War I. Was a time when that was happening. So it's not a one-time historical event. Right.
This is the process of Hester Panim in action. This is how it works. It's like the physics.
This is very beautiful because I mean, if you absorb this and take it seriously, it puts so much weight and responsibility on us and our actions. Like, it's one thing to say I sin and I've caused a small harm in the world, but when we realize our sins collectively can cut off this divine flow and kill Moshe spiritually, it's really heavy, right? It's profound. So I like it.
Yeah, no, it does up the ante, and that can. I think that's good, actually. So, there are different arguments to be made about whether that's healthy or not, right? I know some people would say it causes too much guilt and it's unproductive and people feel like they've done a small sin they can never recover. On the other hand, it provides, I think, a real framework, belief is always subjective, but of relating to the world in a deep way, which provides a clear structure of meaning and connection. And by the way, connection that transcends even one life. Right, you see here figures live, but the energy and life forces they draw down or cut off, respectively, are eternal. And so to us is the next part. So maybe we'll pause there. I think that's plenty for today. Next time, the staff. So it says the Egyptian had a spear in his hand. Teaser. Is the spear in the hand of the Egyptian, the mateh, the rod that Moshe uses to do the miracles. And note the Egyptian spear is trying to kill us, but Moshe's spear is doing miracles to save us. So how can they be the same? what does the equation of this mean? And note, as this continues, the Zohar continually blending the demonic and the divine in ways where they are hard to decipher, actually, at times.
Yeah.
You know, noting both the clarity, but also the ambiguity. Okay.
All right,
This
thank
was
you.
today's episode of the snowy day. So I hope we'll continue this. I think 2 or 3 more sessions on Benayahu, and we'll have finished the Amara's Benayahu, which is a classic. It's a classic. So this is
All right,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone.
Yes.